Hi guys, I am having a lot of trouble exporting the first narrative display workshop we did with the cohort. So I wanted to give you an opportunity to review or to catch up and to do that in a bit of a shorter format here by going through the slides with you and exploring narrative display. You won't have the advantage of the cohort conversation, but you'll be ready to try it, I hope, and ready for the next conversation in another week. So here goes. Exploring narrative display. We're experimenting with new approaches for deeper connections in physical display. So as part of the Beyond Bookstores cohort workshop, one of the things that we're trying to do is up our physical store game, basically, and see what the physical store can do that it hasn't already been doing. And we obviously love stories, or we wouldn't be doing what we're doing. And we're never going to kill storytelling, thankfully, because it's built in the human DNA, the plan. We all come with it, says Margaret Atwood. And I happen to agree. I know you do too, because everybody loves stories. And I asked in the cohort about one of yours. So I'll ask you to think, if you've not thought about that, think about one story that shaped your love of book selling. And I know Sherry shared this example of a little boy who wasn't into reading, who found a book, and not only did he find a book, but he found a series of books, and his mother was so grateful. That's a story we've all experienced, or so much of us, many of us have experienced. And I shared a story of my grandmother and how she had this library that I used to discover over the summers, and that fed my love of discovery. And now I find that, and then I went to the hardware store with my grandfather over the summers, and I watched him lean over the counter and talk to everybody that came in, and he knew the whole community, and they knew him. He knew the plumbing systems of every buddy in the community, and that was a beautiful thing. And the blend of those two things, my grandmother's English teaching love of reading and availability of library with my grandfather's hometown hardware store, shaped my love of this independent bookseller world. So what's yours? Think about it for a second, because that's an important touchstone for us as we talk about narrative and narrative display, because one of the keys here is that all narrative is personal. It's got to be a narrative of one. And I used this slide, and I asked, what's interesting about this slide? And I think it's interesting, the incongruence between she's smiling and she's in the rain, and she's got a hood, but she's not got it up. And she's got her hands uplifted as if she's joyous in the rain. And she's just off center. And she's in this yellow parka, which is, bright and eye-catching. You get the feeling of nature behind her, but it's muted. She's definitely in focus. There's a lot that's compelling about this photo. And whenever you look at a photo that you find compelling, think about display, because display is sort of like a miniature. It's sort of like its own sort of photo. And speaking of display, we recognize this from You've Got Mail, Meg Ryan coming into the store. I think Steve Wax, you pointed out that she's coming in from the cold into the warm, and you get the warmth of light, the pools of light, which is a pattern language. That's something we look for. You get the idea of ornate materials that are all around the cash wrap, and these beautiful displays. You get waist high display, you get open shelving, you get just this feeling of local and all of these personal items. This couldn't be anybody else's store. And all of these things tell a story when you walk in. I mean, you just glance at this photo and you've got elements of a good story already in motion. So as booksellers, we want to connect deeply with customers. And often we're connecting with people who haven't read regularly at all. We're exploring ways to deliver this journey experience that our community craves, because a display that connects puts books in hands and hearts. That's kind of our mission. And narrative storytelling, or storytelling in book display, is simply books and objects that guide the viewer on a journey. Books and objects together that guide a journey. And I've got a few, givens, if you will, assumptions that I'm building on, building blocks. One is that bookselling is a profession, that this is a unique profession that is sort of a blend of counseling and marketing and retail and intuitiveness and organization, all kinds of things. But book selling is a profession, and that as a professional, we create connection and experience, just like a museum curator would do. Or, but it's a unique connection and experience that we're creating, and that connection stimulates curiosity and choices. The connection that we stimulate, and displays are an extension of us, extension of bookseller expression. They are places where our fingertips come to life in the books. And when displays and booksellers are in sync, the space is alive. It is really different. It's different than if the booksellers and books don't feel in sync, because bookselling is a profession. And what we're doing in there is a really, in each store, in each space, is really part of that profession. Um, so, and this is what James Dawn is doing. And you've heard of James Dawn. He's the fella that comes out of the Daunt bookselling world and helped Waterstones write themselves, and then is now helping Barnes and Noble as CEO rethink things like paid positioning and really get in touch with bookseller passion. And some people are like, wow, that's wild and random. And it is, and maybe too random for our taste, but it's working. And I think we can improve upon what he's doing. I think we, in the best spaces and in our best moments, we are very much head and shoulders above what's happening. Sorry, Barnes and Noble, but we're really we're borrowing ideas from engaging museums, from nonprofits, and from books themselves. We want to really level up this idea of storytelling and display. And so what is a good story? A good storyline: easy to understand, contagious, inspiring, inclusive, believable, useful. It's something that you can absorb very fast. A story in a visual, covers and objects matter. People do buy books by their cover. We know that. That's kind of proven. They buy cereal by its cover. So we absorb 60 times faster with visuals than linear based text or content alone. We know that with shrinking attention spans and less than a tenth of a second, 65% of the world's population are visual learners. All of this makes the case that we are about creating good visual experience in the store. And here we uncovered the key ingredients for developing an effective visual story, creating magnets, if you will. We want it can do any or all of these. It can feel like entertainment. It can be engaging, fun, you play with it. It can be relatable. It can be something that we've all experienced. It can have some sort of duality, point and counterpoint, or the tale of two cities kind of approach. It can make the customer the hero. Yeah, the customer is the hero. It can point to a higher purpose, or be empowerment marking, how you too can have this life, how you aspirational kinds of displays. It can be believable, like, can you believe that this happened and this happened? And that's a display. It can share vulnerability. Now, I've seen a lot of this. I have a friend who does a plant store, new friend, at 2 doors down. And I so admire her marketing online and what she does in the store, because she does all of these things every day. She took a mental health day the other day on a Monday, and she shared her vulnerability that sometimes she gets overwhelmed and she feels disconnected from her work, and she just needs to break away, and did that. I've seen Kelly Justice and others in the book industry do the same thing. I've seen us make customers the hero, where we take a child who's achieved, or a person who, even when we do shelf talkers, or we say what librarians recommend, it makes them heroes. It's like I've got loads of space, which may be my problem. But anyway, as we go on, we've got storytelling is sort of the key to everything. It is how we communicate our history, how we communicate experience, how we create communication. It's all the stuff. It's how we bring characters to life, like, Enzo Ferrari. It's this idea that we're bringing people about, and I'm going to skip over these a little bit, but Susan Stone is a local person who makes pottery, and she is a character in her own story, just as you are a character in yours. She also has a cat who's a character in the story. So when we talk about bringing characters to life in storytelling, some of the characters are in your very store. They're the living, breathing humans and four-legged animals. Parnassus does a great job of bringing the dogs to life and each person to life. And every person is a character with a story to tell. We can also create suspense, and we can do that. Some people do that in their social media with their reveals and with what's in the box, all of those kind of things. Displays that create a little bit of suspense. I don't think the spyglass above this exactly does that trick, but it does cue us to think about how are we thinking about suspense. I think this is a really neat one because you have to bend down and get on the floor to see this little diorama in a cash wrap at Cover to Cover Books. And there's actually a Mrs. Mouse and a Mr. Mouse, and each of them have this collection of books. She's a painter, he's a reader and a pipe smoker, and you've got all this stuff going on, and it always is changing, and it creates a little suspenseful moment in that display. So as we talk about narrative and displays, we're gonna talk about this in two ways, two storylines. So the object here is to prepare you to try it, to try doing your own narrative display. Before we meet up next time, and when we meet up next time, we're going to be looking at what you did and asking you how it worked, what you noticed about what you did. And you can pick a storyline. There's one of two. And then we're looking at three types of narratives and displays. So I'm asking you to pick a storyline and then pick a narrative or a type of narrative display and try this at home. So the two storylines, either pick someone goes on a journey or a stranger comes to town. And John Gardner said there were only two. I don't know if that's true, but at least these are two good ones for us to start with. So someone goes on a journey could be, like I could tell the tale of my husband Dave's journey with growing things. He's a city slicker from the Philly area. Here he is in Tennessee, and he's determined to learn to grow things. He's determined to turn dirt into soil. Our clay pots of a yard into something that can grow things. Or here's Millie, and she's got one eye, by the way. She's got her own stories to tell. Interestingly, she's thinking about reading the newspaper, but Millie has her own very interesting story. And we could talk about Millie's journey, or we could talk about a stranger comes to town. You could pick this story. And you can see we can have fun with it. This new person comes to town, and then what happens? The power is that it connects with you in some way, transferred to display. So I mentioned, that 2-minute introduction thing that, tell one story that has led you in or influenced you in book selling. If you get in touch with that story, that can really help you. Maybe you want to bring that to life in your store, or draw some inspiration from your home, because your home is where you really express yourself in display all the time. I've got a fly that's trying to catch me. Okay, so you picked your storyline. Either a stranger comes to town, or a person goes on a journey, and that person could be you. So there's three types of stories: theme, shared quest, and individual voice. Theme is different than topic. And let's talk about that for a second. Themes are easy, though. So a topic would be like, it's summertime, but a theme is like a statement. It sort of takes a position or makes a statement. It could be summertime is the time to learn something. That's a theme. Summertime stories in the South, I don't know, are the best. That's not a very good one. You can come up with a better one. I use Dolly Parton here as my muse because she's a song teller, and this idea that the best stories are in song in the South. Songs of the South are our stories. That's a neat way to look at it. And I pulled in Loretta Lynn and Patsy Cline and some of those things. Themes are really easy to do. It's kind of level one in storytelling. So you can take a topic, make a statement about it, pick a color, a genre, other connecting device that pulls the story together. But the theme shows up in the particular position you take, that statement you make in your display. So a lot of times the themes can come directly from a book, like The Cook You Want to Be. That's a theme. A lot of times the titles themselves give us a theme. And here I've got, I put the queen up, And this is beautiful because we've got color flow, we've got height, we've got pyramiding, we got a lot of good things going on. But what isn't happening here is there's no statement, there's no theme. This is topical, not thematic. This is, I'm telling a tale about the queen. Well, if I made a statement, I'd say the queen lived a very um, uneventful life, or the queen gave us more than you might think, or I need a statement, I need something that really hooks us into this display for it to be powerful. Objects can anchor, and I think this is a good one from Story and Song. This is a piece of wood from a tree that fell during a hurricane, and what they discovered after the hurricane dropped all those trees was that they lost a lot of the root system that was actually holding together the island, and they started seeing um, impacts, even as in streets and in other places, and appreciating what these trees were giving the island. So the hurricane happened, and then we moved forward differently. So these books are really about conservation and being interested in what happens with a hurricane, or it could be that story. This is the story of food, which is, as a theme, it's more of a topic than an actual story. But we could say, you can eat healthy-ish. That's a statement. And what I like about this particular display is that it uses a lot of uh, good merchandising devices. Like, it at least has a topic at the top, the story of food, that's clear. And so you're going to read healthy-ish at the bottom because, boom, you can read it fast. The story of food, 6 seasons, Cuba, healthy-ish, Japan. You get the idea that on every turn around this octagonal, you're going to learn about food. Simple. And that's really the thematic display. So a theme can be an area of interest. Kids can learn to knit, something like that. Or this one, which I think is probably one of the best illustrations we have. The strongest thing about a dad is his love. Now there's a statement. That's a theme to pull around. So I've pulled in Dave as a dad and his love of fishing, but also my grandfather's ties, and I've positioned them on my grandmother's silver tray. I've got a wonderful cup from Books Are Magic and Officer Clemens. Just a lot of things here developing this theme that are integrated in display. And this is one that could be easily, you can move it in and out. You sell an object, you could easily put something else in while keeping with the theme that the strongest thing about a dad is his love. So we just want to make it clear. Clarity, comprehension, connection, top to bottom, left to right. If you're doing a theme, make it clear. This is a story of birds of paradise, top to bottom. You can see it easily. So then the second one we've got, the second way that you could choose to develop your story, is a shared quest. And this explores what you need for the journey. It invites you to explore some questions like, what are your go-to dinners? It's a simple one, shared quest that we can relate to. Or how do we grow flowers after all? Another shared quest. Or how do we train our dogs? How we build our houses? How we fix what's broken? How we appreciate each other. It doesn't have to be how. Things that help us aspire and achieve. So, and it can be silly, from helping your children love bath time. That's a thematic quest because it involves doing something, and it involves doing something that's relatable. So I knew one lady at the American Library Association, she did one on, she had her two daughters and they were meeting their birth mother for the first time. And so here's this intensely personal display that she created. It was so powerful because it came from her, and not just because we were hearing from her, but you could feel it in the display. In the books that she chose, she had pictures of her daughters and herself. She had permission. She had a brief write-up, and boom, it was relatable to anyone who's been through a difficult family, pivotal family moment like that. That's a shared quest. So we want to show your story and do it in a type of integrated display. I asked the group, this is a beautiful picture, and I love the display, and I'm using it with permission because it's beautiful, and I think it can be better if we talk about storytelling. And what I asked the cohort was, how could this be better? What do you think? One person suggested that we could do, see, we're sort of thinking departmentally here. We've got cookbooks and they're beautifully displayed, neat, tidy. We've got bowls, we've got specialty teas, and we've got these other kind of big cups and cookware. It's all kind of there, and it's very, very pretty. But what would happen if we decided to make a story of it? Like a shared quest, like we were just talking about. We said, if we did shared quest, it would be how to throw a great Italian dinner party. And we put the book with some of the dishes and we put it together in sort of a place setting, and we let somebody imagine themselves throwing a great Italian dinner party. Or that's a shared quest, how to cook Peruvian, how to, something that really we can relate to. Or thematic, a statement like, make your kitchen a mosaic of subcultures, something that lets you just really integrate the display and not think in departmental terms. Mix this up a bit. That would add power and storytelling to this display. It's a good display. Okay, individual voice. That's me a long time ago. Um, and I'm singing there because individual voice is usually, it's always about one person. It's kind of a story of one. I'm borrowing that from Wendy Russell, who gave that story of one concept, museum of one, I think she said. Because when you go into a museum, you're getting a story of one person and you leave very excited. And every person has layers and has lots to share. So if you're going to tell an individual story in display, you want to think like a museum curator. Think like, I'm going to tell this one person story. And it can be, in a museum, you could do that on one wall or in one display. So if you think that way, what objects do you pull in? What pictures do you pull in? What books do you put in? How do you make this story of this one person come alive? And it needs to be personal. It needs to be something that couldn't be anyplace else, like your fingerprint. It needs to be about you, your team, a community member, a story of one person. I dream, and we haven't done this yet, but we're doing our first story of one in my little bookstore that Dave and I and Ashley are founding, called Plenty. And we have the story of Diego, and I'll take pictures and I'm watching what happens with his display. I'm anxious to see how the week goes and what we sell off of that display. And while I'm watching, I'm going to treat it like a lab experiment. I'm going to keep changing it if people don't touch it. Because if they don't touch it, it's not working. So that's one of the things I'm going to look at. We can use individual voice in exploring this idea of one person. The Books That Built Me is a good idea to have somebody like, this is Harry Styles and Harry's house, and he's got all these books from all these different genres. A lot of children's books here, but it would be easy to kind of pick somebody, put their photo at the center, and surround it with books that they love. Or to make it like a scavenger hunt where you have a color code for somebody and you're going to discover Lynn through the store, and we'll get little Lynn tabs and we'll learn about Lynn all the way through the store. Individual voice could be a neat way. We did one called What's Cookable Reading, where we asked people for their picture and a book, and with that picture and a book, we created a whole display that had, What's Cookville Reading, and it had Cookville's Our Town, and we had the person and the book with each person. It was fascinating to see people make similar choices that have very dissimilar perspectives generally, or expected to have different perspectives. So that was really cool and really popular. We tell tiny stories when we do staff picks. This is a story of one person's view. So it can be as simple as a good shelf talker or a bunch of shelf talkers, or as elaborate as a full out store scavenger hunt, or a single display that's like you would see at a museum, almost a museum of one. A good idea. Here's an example of a museum of one. And if your individual story includes someone famous, give it some kind of personalizing element. So this one is about Jacques Pepin, and he lives on Amelia Island. It's from Story and Song. I love the way they do pyramiding, and they include some life from outside. There's some water. There's a lot of freshness here. And the thing about that personalizes it is people, there's a lot of grandparents in Amelia Island. They have a lot of grandparent culture. And the statement that this would make is you can cook with your, it could be a shared quest, how to engage your grandchildren in cooking with you, or a statement, you can cook with your grandchildren. Either way, theme, thematic quest, whatever you call it. That's the theme with variations that you're feeling out of this display. It's this grandparent power that we're playing on. Brad Sells is somebody in our community. He makes beautiful things that are in the Smithsonian. He collects wood from all over the world. And so there's stories behind every piece that he does. And he's really good at showing how it's made and doing that online. We can do the same with our storytelling. This is another, the barista, the baker, the happiness maker. A lot of people tell stories on their wall with words that tell their story, how they got here. And that's something that people love to see, because again, that gives that feeling of local and of a sense of place. So food for thought. One person is the focus, a museum of one. What books, artifacts, messaging would go in that display? Okay, so that's all. And now as we're thinking about the stories we want to tell, whether you're doing a theme, a thematic quest, or a story of one, ask yourselves, what stories are going to bring the generations together? Or how would you define your sense of place, your school, your community, your local brand, like the one I showed about the baker and the happiness maker? Do you have a curious people story that just pops into your mind that needs to be told? Or do you have a story that's going to encourage interest in different genres? We're in, I've got Song of the Cell, and it's a real life great book about what's happening in cellular biology today. And it's so connected to fantasy and sci fiction and the big questions that are asked, and which is also connected to poetry. So that's a story that I could tell. I could start with poetry and pull it out of Song of the Cell, or I could tell a story of Cindy, who is a cellular researcher that's retired in our community, and that would just be, it would lead us to all the genres. Or whose inspirational story would you like to tell? You've got an inspirational story, your store is full of them. So think about this story that you want to tell. And in our cohort, I asked them to think and go round robin and build on the 2-minute story they gave at the very beginning. So for instance, I gave the story of my grandmother who had the library and my grandfather with the hardware store, and how those two things really came together for me. So if I were going to build a thematic display, I could tell a story of me and exactly that story, and say, this is how I came to love bookselling. And here's a picture of my grandmother and grandfather outside the hardware store. And here's my grandmother's sword and Shakespeare. And I could do that kind of display as if, it's, as if people are interested, because, and pick a member of your staff, because any person's story is going to be interesting if done well, because we are all interesting and layered people. So a few quick fundamentals as you tell stories. One is that we're trying to in some ways do some atomic merchandising habits and have some lessons in the chemistry that is the art of merchandising. And part of that is color flow. There's a chemistry to color flow, especially if you're not colorblind. And this drives some people crazy, but others love it and have found it a very effective way to make books relatable and to pull things together in unexpected ways. Again, if you're doing both color and a theme, developing a theme or a thematic quest or a story of one, then the color suddenly has more meaning and power. Pyramids, we like them everywhere. So remember that to work up or work down, we read top to bottom, left to right. In America. And so as you're thinking about storytelling, think about use of a pyramid and color flow in doing that. And think about waist high versus table height. It's only a few inches different, but oh my goodness, what a difference it makes. You sell about 43% more. It's okay on table heights, which is about 30 inches. But if you go up to 33, 4, 5, or 6, you're really where museums are. And it's amazing to watch how much difference it is. People shop looking down. That's how they read, looking down. It's kind of a thinker's position, and they pick up, kind of without moving the elbows a lot. So also something to think of. If it's waist high, it will fly, and you can stack it that way. You also want to create this sense of specialness and scarcity. And the specialness here is created with a silver tray that has real meaning to me, and you can feel that meaning. So when you bring in your object from home, it could get broken. Something could happen, but you bring in an object that has meaning or has history, it's going to feel as special as it is. So the challenge this week, our challenge is to create at least one narrative display that you can take a picture of. Use theme, use shared quest, or use individual voice. Take a picture of it or them if you do more than one, and please send it to me for our group work. And notice, please, what happened. Did people touch it? Was it engaging? If not, don't wait. Continue experimenting and continue noticing so that you can report out like the scientists that you are. And that's really the idea of this Beyond Bookstores cohort. We're trying to really get out of the norm and think about what else can we do to really make this level up. And we're all professionals here. We're all trying to level this up and do this together. So it's not that I'm an expert. I've been experimenting with some things. What is exciting to me is that we get to do this together. I have done this particular thing in a couple of workshops and was amazed at the results. I'd like to really document here what works so that we can make that useful to you and to everybody else too, others in our good industry. So we'll discover, there are bunches of stories in every room. So let's go find them and tell them and then come back together. And next time, our entire meeting is going to be a round robin about what you tried and how that worked and what you noticed. And then our goal is going to be to see if we can learn from each other and get some ideas that will improve the display for a second round of trial, a second round of measurements for that third meetup, where we really get to lean into what or solidify what's working and why. I hope this is helpful, and I'm sorry for the absence of the cohort here, but this way you've at least gotten the content and you'll be ready to participate next time. Thank you.